So I have a couple of projects that I run. The one I spend the most time on currently is this project called Bitcoin Plus Plus. It's an international developer conference series. So I run around the globe and hang out with developers that are interested in Bitcoin projects. We're doing 7 events this year in 7 different countries. We did 6 last year. And it's just a really great way of, I think, bringing the developer community together, no matter where they are in the globe, so they can meet other people working on Bitcoin and hopefully find projects or opportunities both for their project to get more users or people working on it, or learn about a place where they can maybe fit in if you're a developer who wants to get involved in a project. I really hope to make it a good kind of gateway to how to get more involved in the open source community. Right, so I got into development in Bitcoin, mostly worked on a Lightning implementation in C called Core Lightning, and worked on Lightning specs. I've been pretty much at every Lightning specification meeting except for the very first one that happened before I got into Bitcoin. So I was a big contributor to the Lightning open source ecosystem for more than like half a decade. Occasionally I do a few pull request reviews for them. I'm very behind on my work because I've been going to so many events lately. But yeah, so I definitely know a lot of the developers and what it's like to work in the developer ecosystem because I spent a lot of time there myself.
The Bitcoin Lightning Network has long faced criticism for its size and adoption, but according to Nifty, many of those comparisons may be fundamentally flawed. Nifty reveals that the Bitcoin Lightning Network is often misunderstood because many analysts rely on publicly available metrics, particularly the amount of Bitcoin locked in Lightning channels, to evaluate its success. According to him, this approach creates a distorted picture, especially when Lightning is compared with Layer 2, L2, networks and other blockchain ecosystems. Layer 2 refers to a secondary protocol built on top of a base blockchain, or Layer 1, designed to improve scalability and reduce transaction costs while preserving the underlying network's security. Nifty argues that until recently, Bitcoin had relatively few Layer 2 alternatives, making comparisons with more mature ecosystems somewhat misleading. He points specifically to Ethereum's leading Layer 2 networks, such as Arbitrum and Optimism, which process massive transaction volumes and hold significant amounts of capital. However, Nifty emphasizes that these platforms serve fundamentally different purposes than the Bitcoin Lightning Network. While Lightning was created primarily as a decentralized payment network, many Ethereum Layer 2 ecosystems are dominated by decentralized finance, DeFi, speculative trading, lending, and other high-risk financial activities. According to Nifty, measuring Lightning solely by transaction volume ignores its most important characteristic, decentralization. He argues that despite frequent criticism, the Lightning Network remains one of the most decentralized Layer 2 payment protocols operating at scale today. In his view, the debate surrounding Lightning ultimately reflects a broader misunderstanding within the crypto industry about how scalability, utility, and decentralization should be evaluated across competing blockchain ecosystems. Stay ahead of the crypto curve, subscribe, and share to keep up with the latest Bitcoin developments.
I think a lot of things, people look at the amount of Bitcoin that's publicly locked into Lightning channels, because that's something that's publicly accessible. That's like a public data point. I think you can look at that. And then what they compare it to is other Layer 2s and other ecosystems, right? So they're not comparing it to another Bitcoin Layer 2, because up until even, I would say, maybe in the last couple months, there really weren't so many other options. But anyways, if you look at the other Layer 2s, like in the Ethereum ecosystem, even something like Arbitrum, or what's the other one that was really big? Optimism was one that was competing, I think, for a bit. The amount of money and transactions and volume moving through those networks is enormous. I think there's a couple things there. One is those networks aren't payment networks per se. Sure, you can make payments, but the reason that people have value there is completely different. They're playing completely different games.
It's speculative,
it's
gambling,
speculative.
That sort of thing, yeah.
It's gambling. It's degen stuff where you take out loans against your whatever. This is embarrassing. I'm not really sure what DeFi people do. But I know a lot. But I think it's easy to look at those volumes and be well, it's not as big as this other thing. And it's if you reasonably sit down and say, even if, and this might sound, so maybe this is maybe there's 4 or 5 or 10 Lightning nodes that do the most amount of traffic on Lightning, so to speak. That is still more decentralized than like if we use Arbitrum, which is probably one of the most successful layer 2s on Ethereum, a different cryptocurrency. There's only one node that you can send your transactions to on Arbitrum. It's completely centralized. And it's like, okay, so like, why is it that you're actually taking the most decentralized shipped network protocol and calling it centralized? Like none of the actual centralized ones, they don't get criticized nearly as publicly for something that's obviously true of them. Why are people using that as a critique for Lightning when it's like I think provably like the least centralized of all of them? I don't have a good answer for that.
As Bitcoin adoption grows, the debate over whether the Lightning Network can scale efficiently without sacrificing decentralization is becoming increasingly important. Nifty reveals that one of the biggest barriers to broader adoption of the Bitcoin Lightning Network is its complex liquidity model. The Lightning Network, a second-layer protocol built on top of Bitcoin that enables off-chain transactions, was designed to provide faster and cheaper payments without congesting the main blockchain. However, unlike traditional on-chain Bitcoin transactions, where users can immediately spend the funds they receive, Lightning requires participants to have liquidity pre-configured and locked within payment channels before transactions can occur. According to Nifty, this liquidity requirement creates a significant usability challenge. He explains that sending a payment through Lightning often requires multiple times the transaction amount to be available across the network's routing channels, making the system more capital-intensive than standard Bitcoin transactions. This added complexity has contributed to criticism that the Lightning Network is difficult for average users to understand and utilize effectively. Nifty notes that emerging Bitcoin scaling solutions such as Arc, Spark, and state chain-based systems are attempting to address these liquidity challenges. However, he argues that these alternatives frequently introduce trade-offs by relying on additional parties to validate transactions, potentially sacrificing some of the decentralization and trustless properties that have made the Lightning Network one of Bitcoin's most important scaling innovations. Let's get back to the interview.
So I think the big one, and I think one of the reasons that people say Lightning is difficult or has failed, is that there's a liquidity requirement in that you have to have value like already locked up or configured and a credit in such a way before you can start to use the protocol. When you're on chain and someone sends you the Bitcoin directly, you get it and you can immediately send it anywhere you want. You can send it to any participant in the network because you're all on the same kind of global ledger, right? In Lightning, your ability to transact with another person on the network isn't necessarily like, even though you all speak the Lightning protocol, if the way that the liquidity or the actual Bitcoin locked up in those channels isn't configured in like the correct way, you may not be able to transact with another party. And I think that that is complicated and not straightforward and surprises people. Some of the other things is that there's, I would almost say like a liquidity multiple. So if you want to transact with someone on Lightning, there needs to be so let's say you wanted to send 100 Satoshis. Depending on the pathway that your money's going to move, you need a multiple of those Satoshis already locked and committed into the network such that you can transact. Maybe 200-300 more Satoshis have to be available for you to route your payment, so to speak. So it's more expensive in terms of the availability of the Bitcoin, whereas on-chain, if you have 100 Satoshis in your wallet, you can easily take it and send that 100 Satoshis to someone else without having to worry about where and how this like liquidity network is configured. And I would say that's like the biggest thing when you start looking at things like Arc or like the Spark, which is more of a state chain system. They've basically recreated state chains.
Spark, which is the David Marcus's
Light Sparks protocol that they wrote. I believe it's more a state chain like than anything. But that one's one I haven't, to be honest, really looked super closely at how their protocol works. One of the things that those, like all those other protocols, and I kind of called them out for having more of a, like you have almost this like third party relationship. You need help to make a transaction. You need someone else to sign off on your transaction before it's valid. One of the nice things, so this is kind of becomes like, the trade-off of moving to that kind of system is that in some cases, or many of the cases, the multiple of liquidity that you need goes back down again. And it becomes, the system is like kind of more open. Like if you're all on the same mint, you can directly send all of your value directly to another person on that same mint without having to worry about, like I was saying, this configuration of capital inside of a network that you can't really see. Like, so Lightning's really, I think, more private than you might suspect initially. So I was like writing courses and kind of putting them up there with the idea that Replit would have this university of courses, and then Base 58 would be like the Bitcoin classes you could take. So it was like you log in and you could like see there's like markdown, or like they'd have like text, and then it gives you like a coding little page, and you could work through the exercises. And then they had this really cool thing called unit tests or whatever. So I'd write little challenges, and as you made the little code pieces return the correct results, the little checkboxes on the unit test would light up, which is really cool. They pivoted into being an AI platform, or like an AI coding, vibe coding platform for anyone who wants to build like a website. We're using it for this nonprofit I'm a part of called Bitcoin Scholars Fund that just started a few months ago. So we use it for our website because everyone on the team can get in and type what they want on the website, and it updates, and it's very easy to publish.
The ongoing debate surrounding the Bitcoin Lightning Network highlights a broader challenge facing the cryptocurrency industry: balancing scalability, usability, and decentralization. While critics often focus on transaction volume, capital efficiency, and adoption metrics, these measurements may fail to capture the core value proposition that distinguishes Bitcoin's Layer 2 ecosystem from competing blockchain networks. The Lightning Network was designed primarily to preserve Bitcoin cost transactions, a goal that inevitably introduces technical trade-offs such as liquidity management and routing complexity. Emerging Bitcoin scaling solutions are attempting to address these limitations, but many do so by introducing additional trust assumptions or centralized elements. As the Bitcoin ecosystem continues to evolve, the key question may not be which scaling solution processes the highest volume of transactions, but rather which approach can successfully balance efficiency, accessibility, security, and decentralization while remaining aligned with Bitcoin's foundational principles. Is the Bitcoin Lightning Network unfairly criticized, or is it really failing to scale?